Hello my friends, I just wanted to give you a little update regarding the 6970M Radeon video card, originally taken from a 2011 iMac and used in my late 2009 27-inch iMac to replace my now dead 4850 video card. For those of you who have seen my previous video, you know I ended that video on a very positive light. I had text right next to me that said it works great, and at the time of that video it was the absolute truth. As you could see in the testing, everything was working fine. But subsequent to that, I decided to do further testing, and the best way to test is to have your son play games on it. So I did that, took the iMac downstairs and had him play on it for a while, but actually it wasn't a whole long while. He actually called up and said, "I have a black screen," and my heart sank when I heard that. So I went downstairs to take a look, and sure enough, the screen was black, but there was no fan noise, and that was something new. The computer was completely powered down, as if the power cord had been yanked out the back. And I had asked him what was he doing, and he told me he was playing his favorite game, Roblox, which is spelled R-O-B-L-O-X, for those of you who don't know. It's an online game, but you have to install some software on your Mac to actually get it to work. And he normally plays that in the Firefox browser. And I said, well, did you see any lines on the screen? Green lines, any blocky artifacts, any kind of strangeness? Did your game slow down? He said, no, the computer just powered off. That was the big caveat, and it really made me feel quite upset and disappointed. But I wasn't through yet, so I said, okay, I need to start my testing and troubleshooting, and that's what I'm going to report to you now. What I did is I reached around on the left side, on the back, that's where the power button is, and I pressed the button, and there was the bong, and it just booted up right away. No artifacts on the screen or anything. And I, it was about talking to my son, and again he said there was nothing unusual. It just suddenly powered off. So it powered up, and I asked him to reproduce everything he did before while I was watching. And I had my little timer, and I was watching him, and on the minute, every minute, I had him switch out of the game because the game is played in full screen mode and you cannot see the menu bar while you're playing. So I had him to switch to the menu bar because in the menu bar I have iStat menus, which allows me to check the CPU temperature and the GPU heatsink temperature, which is not the GPU chip itself, but the sensor is on the heatsink, which is above the GPU anyway, so it's pretty close to the actual temperature of the chip. And I was watching the temperature, it was going up, and when we last checked at 52 degrees Celsius, which by the way is not hot for these iMacs, it's not. I mean, if you're getting above 90s, then technically it's hot, but 52 degrees is nothing for these iMacs. For PCs, for those of you who are from the PC liquid cooling world and keep your temperatures down to 30 degrees always, Macs are not like that, okay? Now, by the way, I just want to mention that I had all three fans set to run at 2000 RPM. I used SMC fan control to do that, and that is about twice what they are normally. The CPU fan is normally about 940 RPM, and the optical drive fan, which is also the fan that blows air on the video card heatsink, and also the SSD, I have an SSD instead of a hard disk, those two fans were just over 1000 RPM at a base speed. But again, I had all of them set to 2000 RPM when my son and I were doing this testing. So he was playing his game, and once it was about 52 degrees, then I said, okay, switch back now. I want to check the temperature again, and then boom, right before my eyes, it shut down. And I verified once again, no fans were running. I was able to boot up again, and I did other testing in other software that wasn't a game, and it worked fine. So I then decided to come back to my video, and in the comment section I posted a pinned comment, which is just a comment by me that I pin and make sure it stays perpetually at the top of all comments so that everyone can see it. And by the way, if you're not watching my videos on YouTube, you really should sometimes, because I have a lot of useful information in the text description that's under my videos, and sometimes I will put a comment there and it will always be at the top so you can read the latest information on what's going on. But I had some very good dialogue with some of you in that pinned comment, and if any of you want to go there and read it, you can, but just to summarize for you, we talked about power supplies. Could it possibly be the power supply? And there was no indication that my power supply was bad before with the old 4850 card, and I honestly don't think there is, but I did open my Mac and check the card. And I can show you a little bit of that now. Basically, if you look at the electrolytic fluid-filled capacitors, none of them are bulging, none of them have been blown out. They all look perfectly fine. Now that doesn't mean they're absolutely perfect. I would have to desolder them and test them outside the circuit to know for sure, but if it did have a bad capacitor, which is usually the problem with most power supplies, I should have seen some signs of that. Something other than video related in my past usage, but I didn't. Now, one person pointed out that the 6970M draws more power than the 4850 does. Okay, that's true, but here's the thing. If you check power supplies for the 2009, 2010, and 2011 27-inch iMacs, even though the part numbers are different, all three are rated at 310 watts. 310 watts. Now what does that say? That says, well, if the 310 watt power supply of the late 2009 iMac, which I own, was inadequate to drive the 6970M video card, why then did Apple use a 310 watt power supply in the 2011 iMac? I mean, it's a logical question, right? And it's true, I don't have a pinout. I don't have a detailed description of every single wire coming out of the power supply. For example, here's a 12-volt line. It can handle up to 12 amps. Here's a 5-volt line. It can handle up to 16 amps. I wish I had that, but I don't. But I'm going to guess, based upon that wattage of the power supply, the overall power it can supply, being 310 watts, across all three of those models, that's telling me, well, it's probably not the power supply. Even so, because of my financial situation, I just really don't have the desire to spend money. I need to support my family. And I don't want to spend any more, really. Because I could buy a brand new power supply for $150 plus shipping to Japan, which probably would add another $40 to it, and test it. But okay, what happens if that doesn't solve the problem? That tells me some useful information, but I'm out the money for that power supply, which I really didn't need. And so, anyway, I let my wife use the computer, and she used it at a base fan speed. She does email and basic web browsing, which does not include a lot of high-resolution viewing of YouTube videos, and certainly not full screen. And she was able to use it all day for many hours without even a single shutdown. No problems whatsoever. And in her user, SMC fan control allows the fans to be controlled by the system. So these were baseline fan speeds, not 2000 RPM. And again, it didn't have any problem. So in exchanging dialogue with other people in that pinned comment, it was suggested, well, you know, there was this and that going on. And what I decided to do is I'm going to write the seller and say, did you repaste the video card before you sold it to me? I asked them that, and they replied, yes, we did. So it tells me I need to check it. And if I find it's a good job, that's on them. They did a wonderful job. If it's a bad pasting job, that's on them too, because they just admitted that they repasted it. So I did just that, and I'm going to show you some clips of that right now. You can see that they're using different kinds of thermal paste, which is what you would expect. Whether they use thermal pads or not is unknown. It seems like they use some kind of thermal pad replacement. I'm not sure that it's K5 Pro. It looks a bit different. And then I see some residual thermal pad here on the heatsink. Now on the card itself, well, you might say to me, hey, wait a minute, one of those memory chips has no paste on it at all. And you would be correct. And even on the other chips, the coverage is as spotty as you see here. And there seems to be adequate paste on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repaste, clean it all off, and then repaste. And this is after my cleaning. And I took great care to clean it as best as I could. I also found some caked on thermal paste, which indicated that whoever repasted it did not completely clean off all of the old, although it would seem they did on the GPU. I'm talking about the memory chips. But this AMD here isn't perfectly white, and the card looks just a little bit brownish to me. So it's very possible this card has been baked. But I asked them that question, and they never replied directly back to it. They simply said that they did the repasting. But it is possible that this card has been baked before. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because baking them does bring them back to life, and these silly cards have finite life anyway. But when you buy a used card, you never know. Also, they put on this sticker which is written in Chinese, and the sticker was caked on there. I couldn't quite get it off, and I didn't want to scrape it off for fear that I was going to break a trace or something, but basically I'm not too pleased. But when you're buying a used card, honestly, you never know what you're going to get. And even with that said, it does work. It merely goes through some shutdowns that other people have reported online, and I don't think that has anything to do with this card being bad per se, but I am going to put the repasting to the test to see if that improves anything, although I must say that I'm a bit more skeptical about it now, if it actually will. So I just want to show you that I've got my K5 Pro applied as a base coat. Base coat is, if you've ever done painting before, you know you want to put on a primer before you actually put on the full coat of paint. Well, it's sort of different, but sort of similar in that I put on a base thin coat of K5 Pro edge to edge on each of these chips. Edge to edge, as you can see here, and obviously I'm going to need to put on more K5 Pro than this, because there's a gap of at least 3 millimeters between the heatsink and these chips. But as you can see, I put enough on from edge to edge to make sure that there's going to be the maximum surface area contact of the chips. And of course, the heatsink, it has a protrusion that comes down back here. I'm not sure if these chips really, these little tiny chips back here, even need it. But, well, even the guys in Hong Kong put the paste over that, so I'm going to put the paste there too. And I was asked by a commenter once about these diodes on the 6970M. Do we even need to paste these diodes? I don't think so, but yeah, yet the guys in Hong Kong, they put a thermal pad over there, so since I have it open, why not? I have plenty of K5 Pro. It's not going to hurt anything. I went for it. Now you might say, well, what about this diode over here? Isn't he the same as these? And the answer is yes. And you might say, what about these 4 chips? 1, 2, 3, 4. Aren't they the same as the chips in the far back? And the answer to that is yes too. But again, the way that the heatsink is structured, it just doesn't seem to be made for those chips, and you'd really have to put on a lot more K5 Pro on this area, because the place where the heatsink drops down, it drops down to make easier contact with these memory chips on this side, but it doesn't drop down to touch this diode or these chips. So what you're seeing here for 6970M, I think is good enough. And of course, I'm going to have to apply more K5 Pro than this. This is just the base coat. And in addition, at the very end, I always put on my Thermal Grizzly Kryonaut, or in your case, if you have K4 Pro. The reason I'm using Kryonaut is because that's the newest CPU, GPU friendly paste that I have. And, well, I do have a new tube of K4 Pro, but since I have my Thermal Grizzly Kryonaut, which is technically even better than K4 Pro, I'm going to use that. And so here's the result of my repasting job. You see I have an X configuration on the GPU here, which allows it to spread from corner to corner all around the chip instead of just a circle like the dot method does. I like this method best. Any overspill is not a problem because this particular paste is not electrically conductive, it's not capacitive. And it may seem like a lot to others who do not understand what K5 Pro is, but K5 Pro is just the right amount in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions that will simply push down and spread out as I push the heatsink down on it. And it will result in even better thermal transfer. And here's with the heatsink screwed down. I would like to say that overspill by and large does not matter, but you definitely want to make sure that the overspill on this particular memory chip right there on the corner does not overspill. I had to wipe a little bit of mine away. It wasn't touching the gold contacts down below, but I don't want it to, and that's why I wiped it away, to make sure that it wouldn't do that over time. You don't want any type of thermal paste to get on these gold connectors here. That is very, very important. So if you get anything on there or suspect anything might be on there, you need to swab with alcohol and wipe it down both on this side and on the back side. You can see a little bit of overspill here. It's not too bad, but keep in mind you're going to have to put a screw down there to screw this card on the frame. And you don't really want to have thermal paste underneath your screw, so you just take a toothpick or something and wipe that away. So after the repasting, I did another batch of testing. I decided to allow my wife to break in the new paste slowly because she's not going to pound on it, right? She's doing her basic web browsing and email, and she worked on it all day, again at the base fan speed, and no problem. No surprises there. It shouldn't have had a problem because it didn't have a problem before. But after that, I decided later that evening I'm going to do more tests, and so I decided to get my web browser out, Safari, which is what I normally use, and do YouTube testing on it. I did YouTube testing prior to the repaste, and it would, well, on a 60 frames per second 1080p video, it allowed the temperatures to go up to about 61 degrees Celsius, and then it was shut off. And so after the repaste, I did the same test, and for 30 minutes, and the temperature was going up and up and up and up, and it didn't shut off. So I said, well, I need it to go up higher than 65 degrees, because that's all Safari would make it go, the GPU Heatsink. And so I switched to Firefox, which lets me display videos in higher resolution. And by the way, all of my videos are in 4K. So for those of you who are Mac Safari users, if you want to see more resolution, you're going to have to use Firefox or Chrome. I don't like those browsers personally. I think it makes the colors look weird. And in fact, it makes me look more red in the face. And so what I have to do actually is desaturate my face in Final Cut Pro so it looks a little bit undersaturated in Safari, but then it still looks a bit oversaturated in Firefox and Chrome. Oh well, nothing I can do about it. But the benefit of those browsers is they'll let you watch 4K videos if you want. I wish Apple would fix that problem, you know, but they don't want to support Google's codec, so we're stuck at 1080p. Anyway, I use Firefox to watch a Costa Rica 4K video. Actually, if you type in Costa Rica 4K in YouTube search bar right now, you'll be able to find the same video. It's right at the top. And that's what I tested with at 1440p, which is the maximum resolution of my iMac's 27-inch screen. And I was running it, and you know, the temperatures kept going up, but it didn't shut down. So I said, I need another video, so I grabbed an Iceland video. And I wanted to pick videos where there's a lot of overhead movement, you know, movement in maybe water, not just a slow-moving, one part of the scene moving type thing, but where there's everything in the scene that's moving, because that really taxes the GPU. And so those Iceland videos in 4K did that. I didn't display them at 4K. I showed them, ran them at 1440p. And I kept flipping. You know, I was viewing them in full screen mode, and I flipped between full screen and back to the menu bar so I could see what the temperatures are. And the temperatures were going up and up and up, and at 75 degrees Celsius, the GPU Heatsink was 75 degrees, and it still hadn't shut down. But I still continued to test. I said, well, how far can it go? Can I hit 80? And it was 76 degrees, and then I switched to full screen mode, and then I switched back again, and for a brief second I think I saw 77, but then it shut down. So although I was in some ways overjoyed, I was also disappointed, because it showed that even my repaste didn't completely fix the problem. And well, I didn't have the fans maxed out, but I did have them twice what the base speed is. So repasting, in addition to fan speed, helps a lot, but it's not a complete cure. And for that reason, I cannot formally recommend this video card to those of you who have a 2010 or 2009 iMac, just because I'm only interested in recommending things to you that I know will not cause you problems down the line. Now, I spoke to the seller, and the seller said he would refund my money, but of course that would not include a refund for the $35 for DHL shipping from China to me, which he recommended that I get. I don't blame him for it, but that would not be refunded. And then of course I would need to pay for the return shipping to him, which also would not be refunded. And so I would be out two-way shipping and still have a dead iMac. So am I going to ship it back to him? Well, I'm not inclined to do that, because it would leave me without an iMac. And believe me, I did a lot of searching for 4850 video cards, and they're hard to find actually. And even when you find one, these eBay sharks are selling them for a higher price than even the 6970M with express mail shipping. I paid $265 total with that express mail shipping to get it shipped to me from Hong Kong to my address in Japan. And so, yes, I know what you're thinking. It's not quite summer yet. It could be hotter, the ambient temperature. If it's higher, that means all of the air that you're using to cool your iMac, it's going to be hotter. You're basically going to be recirculating hot air. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but at the same time, my repasting job did make the video card somewhat usable, and I also had my son play some games on it for a short time. It was only about 15 minutes, but for the 15 minutes, it didn't have a problem. I would assume that once it reaches a certain temperature, it's going to shut down. Now, I don't think it's totally thermal, folks. It is thermal, obviously, as evidenced by the fact that repasting allowed it to be more usable, but normally in an iMac, for compatible hardware, Mac OS and hardware work in harmony, such that Mac OS should intelligently shut down whatever it needs to on the video card to reduce performance rather than just shut down the computer suddenly and without notice. And so that's why I think there must be some kind of firmware incompatibility between the 2009 iMac hardware and the 6970M. It's no surprise because the 6970M was created for the 2011 iMac. But I wish there was a way to know exactly what it is so that that could be fixed. There's nothing really more that I can do in terms of putting on better paste, because the paste I used was the best it could be, Thermal Grizzly Kryonaut. I mean, for a non-conductive, non-electrically conductive paste, that's really the best you can buy. And my K5 Pro job was really perfect, and that's the best I could do. So that's really what I want to say, is that I have mixed feelings and I cannot recommend the card, but I will continue using it and continue updating you folks on the status of it. Now, to close this video, I'd like to thank everyone who have very kindly subscribed to this channel, and there have been some people that I wish to formally thank who have supported this channel through PayPal since the end of March until very recently. And going back from the end of March, I'd like to thank Cesar Cedraro for your contribution. I'd also like to thank Owen Roberts. Thank you very much. And also James Hart. Thank you for your contribution. And Jim Mihorty. Thank you all. I would like to give special thanks to Jim Mihorty because he really made a special contribution. It wasn't $1,000, it wasn't several $100s or anything like that, but by far he was the biggest contributor to this channel to date. And I do write a personal note to each and every one who contributes to this channel, but I also tell them I want to publicly give thanks to them for their donations, and that's what I'm doing now. And your support, as I mentioned in those personal notes, does go to supporting this channel and making this channel better. And so I hope I can do that by still coming out with content that informs and entertains. There are some of you who subscribe to my channel because you like vintage Mac recapping or talk about vintage Macintoshes, and obviously this video is not about that, but I do have one video in the works which is about floppy drives and recapping of those, which surprisingly no one has ever done before. So hold out for those. I have other vintage Mac videos coming up, and if you have comments or suggestions, well, that's what the comments are for. I apologize if you see sweat coming down my face here because I wanted to cut out, I'm here at home, and I wanted to cut out some of the noise from outside, and I need to close all the windows to do that. It's a pretty hot day today. And I didn't want to have the noise for the air conditioner on, so I have that turned off too. But I read and reply to every comment, so anything you write below, I'll try my best to respond to. If you have suggestions, I'd love to hear them. So I wish each and every one of you a very wonderful and safe day. Thank you for watching.